This man knows broadcasting, entering his 40th season broadcasting Dallas Cowboys football on the Cowboys radio network, and he knows Cowboys. He's Brad Sham back here on the Rich Eisen Show. How are you, Brad?
Good, Rich. How are you?
I'm great. How do you think Witten's going to do in the booth, Brad?
I think Jason Witten will probably be good at whatever he chooses to do. I did not know that he had an interest in broadcasting, and I'm not sure until fairly recently that he knew it. But I do know his personality, his intelligence, his work ethic, and I can't think of any reason why he would not succeed.
Well, in a way that Romo never really showed a side of himself that suddenly came into view, like the guy at the end of the bar who was screaming and yelling at the set. Instead, he's just screaming and yelling through his set next to Nance that became so popular, and he's Emmy nominated this year. Is there a side of Witten that we haven't seen, Brad? Or is that the Witten that we're going to get?
No. Romo, and I'd throw Aikman in there, too. And the difference between Witten and both of them in terms of public persona is his willingness to stand there after games and once a week and take every single question and do it in reasonably good humor. Those other two guys, their patience for doing that kind of wore thin. In terms of what you're talking about, a broadcast personality that will translate, and is there another side to him? Yeah, absolutely. And what people who don't know him and see him only on the field, Rich, have not seen are two things. One is a burning competitiveness. He is as competitive as any player I have ever seen in 40 years. And the other is a deep, insightful knowledge of every aspect of the game. He sees it the way quarterbacks do because of how he studied it, and that's coverages, blocking schemes, the whole thing that makes a play work. And then combined with that, he has a really unusual appreciation and knowledge of the history of the game. I went and sat with him on a flight last year. It was a fairly long flight. Before the flight, the configuration of where the seats were had him in a place where he had a seat next to him. And we may have been going to Washington because Vernon Davis was really going well at the time. And there were a couple of conversations going on, he and coaches and some other broadcasters about who stands where in the all-time ranking of tight ends. And so I said, well, there's a guy who's got an opinion. Maybe let me see what he knows. A lot of times guys don't know anything about history. So I sat down next to him. I said, have you made a study of this? He said, oh, yeah. And we don't have time now for me to tell you, going back to John Mackey and Mike Ditka, his understanding of why his list of the top 5 tight ends would be whatever it was, and specifically what every guy could do and didn't do and wasn't asked to do and how it was different now. And frankly, I'd never had that kind of a historical conversation with him. I didn't realize that his knowledge and passion for all of it was so deep. When you put those things all together, to me, the only thing he's going to have to master is the art of saying it in the number of seconds you have available as an analyst between plays.
Brad Sham, voice of the Cowboys here. What about the excitement, passion, energy from Witten, Brad?
Yeah, don't worry. It'd be different from Romo.
Well, everything's different from Romo, pretty much.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
But you didn't think that Aikman, I don't mean you. I mean, none of us thought that Aikman was going to show that. And, trust me. He'll be fine in that area.
Brad Sham and the Honda Insider Report here on the Rich Eisen Show. So, okay, let's get to other aspects of the Cowboys organization football-wise. Does this leave this team hamstrung a little bit at this position where they were really trying to make them think twice about going in the booth, Brad?
I think that from an X's and O's, who lines up and how do you use your personnel, they're better with him than without him, but he'd be the first one to tell you that he's not the physical player that he was 3 or 4 or 5 years ago. So they will have capable bodies. Jeff Swaim's a pretty good player, and Blake Jarwin's got a chance to be a pretty good player. And the young fellow they drafted from Stanford, Schultz, I haven't seen him, but the little bit of tape I've seen, he's got a chance to be a pretty good player. And, the coaching staff will be challenged to find ways to use the talents of the tight ends they have as well as the backs they have and the wide receivers they have, and find ways to take up some of that slack. Where they will definitely suffer is partly in his experience getting on. He may not be able to get as open as quickly and go as far after a catch as he used to, but he still knew how to do all of the above. And the other guys are going to have to work to that point through experience. And in the leadership department, it's irreplaceable. Leadership and example, and here's how you behave in practice and meetings and with the media after you win, and here's how you do it after a loss, and here's how you bond together in OTAs and training. They haven't got anybody like that. So that's going to now fall to Prescott, in my opinion, and to guys like Zach Martin and Travis Frederick, and to guys like Sean Lee, and he's going to have to find a couple of guys like that. But they've got a huge leadership void right now, and how that translates onto the field is partly going to depend on the coaching staff and partly going to depend on those other players figuring out how to take up some of the slack.
Voice of the Cowboys, Brad Sham, here in the Honda Insider Report. Let's get to Des Bryant here. Why did the Cowboys wait as long as they did to release him when we find out from Will McClay, the assistant director of player personnel, when he appeared locally there in the Metroplex, said that it was a football decision, the inability to win one-on-one, to win downfield? If that was the reasoning, then wasn't that apparent at the outset of free agency as opposed to how long it took to part ways with Dez, Brad?
It'd be a great question for you to ask Will McClay and Stephen Jones. My guess is that the reason they took so long, and Will's not going to lie, but none of those guys, Rich, you know it, nobody's going to tell the whole story. If there's anything that they didn't like about him or felt like they didn't want to put up with, they're not going to say that. I think my personal guess is, and it's based on a couple of conversations with some of the decision makers in the last, month or so. My personal guess is that the reason it took so long is they weren't sure at every level of the decision-making tree that they wanted to let him go. And they may have kept looking for reasons to make a different decision or an amended decision, and ultimately they decided that they couldn't do that. And I don't know that if they had it to do over again, they might not like to have different timing, and maybe they wouldn't. Maybe they're fine with it. But when you ask why did it take so long, what was the timing, if that was the reason, I would submit that there was a layer of reasons that was part of it, and I'm just not sure that they really had convinced themselves, all of them, that they wanted to let him go until they did.
Dare I say that, reading between the lines, that sounds like Jerry just couldn't bring himself to do it until he finally had no choice?
I cannot read through your eyeglasses. You can say whatever you want.
Brad Sham, voice of the Cowboys here on the Rich Eisen Show. And then the draft there. Do you think that the Eagles traded up to get the tight end that they wanted? And then even worse, had David Akers troll the organization in Jerry's house while doing it? Brad?
No, I don't think that's the guy the Cowboys were looking at, no. And the fact that his name is Dallas,
right.
I think and David Akers got a little shrill for my taste in trying to one-up Drew Pearson, but I do admire the spirit, and there's all of them joined in it. But I think they would have loved to have had Vita Vea. Well, I'll tell you the truth. When they were sitting there at the draft got to 12, I kept saying to and I was just sitting in the stands watching. I said, Jerry, call Tampa. Give them something. Get Vea. Then Tampa took Vea. So what do you know? And then after that, I think that they're that sold on Van Der Esch. Obviously, if they were going to move for anybody, it would not have been for the tight end. It might have been for James, and I think that the safety who went much later than anybody thought. And I think that at some point in there, after Vea left, they probably had a couple of more long conversations. Maybe Amazon will do another series next year. We can find out in a year.
Nice.
But I think they probably had some conversations about, okay, James or Van Der Esch, what do you like? And I think they like Van Der Esch that much. It was not about the tight end.
Brad, always enjoy our chats. Always do. Thanks for coming and giving some insight today on the day that Witten takes down the Star and then goes into the booth that Dandy Don Meredith first inhabited. It's unbelievable how the Cowboys keep on sending guys into the booth. Appreciate the time.
As you know, Rich, they are never boring.
That's right. Thanks for the call, Brad. Always appreciate it. At boys_Vox, VOX.
The Rich Eisen Show, weekdays at noon Eastern on Audience.